back with part 2, episode 2. And we're having a good laugh, but we're back, episode 2 of Rockabyes with Miss Janice. And we're on episode 2. So there.
Well, hello. Yes. Last time on Rockabyes, Michael Jackson grew up inside a house where discipline and music lived side by side. From talent shows in Gary to the Motown machine, he spent his childhood preparing for a life on stage. By 19 years old, he'd already become one of the most famous performers in the world. But one meeting was about to change it all. Michael Jackson met Quincy Jones. When Michael walked into the studio with Quincy Jones in 1979, he wasn't trying to repeat the past. He was trying to reinvent himself. For years, the world had known him as the child prodigy from the Jackson 5, the boy with the perfect voice. The one who could dance like James Brown, but Michael was 21 now, and he wanted something different. Not just hits, not just applause. He wanted to create music that felt timeless. Music that could move people emotionally, that could last. The album that he and Quincy made together was called Off the Wall. It sold millions of copies, produced multiple hit singles, and for most artists, that would have been the peak of a career. But for Michael, it was only the beginning, because the next album he imagined would be even bigger, much bigger. He wanted to create the biggest album in history, and that dream would become something the music world had never seen before, an album called Thriller. Talk about manifestation.
Yes. You know what? You're right.
Yeah.
Because even the last episode, he said as a little kid, every time he jumped in the pool, he'd make that.
He would say it.
He would say it. He would manifest it with manifestation. He gave himself manifestations. He actually did The Secret. That's what The Secret is about, what you tell yourself.
And then he did the work behind it.
Yeah. So when work began on Thriller, Michael already knew what he wanted. Not just a successful album, a historic album. One day in the studio while he was playing a pinball machine, someone asked him a question. If this album doesn't do as well as Off the Wall, will you be disappointed? Michael said the question hurt him because in his mind, there was no alternative. Thriller had to be bigger. He wanted it to become the biggest selling album ever made. And he said this in Moonwalk, everybody. And he worked like someone who believed it. Michael described himself simply, I'm a perfectionist. I'll work until I drop. Around this time, Michael reached out to Paul McCartney. This time, he said it plainly, let's get together and write some hits. Their collaboration produced 2 songs, The Girl Is Mine, which would appear on Thriller, and Say, 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 which would become the lead single on Paul McCartney's album, Pipes of Peace. And I just want to say one thing. I meant to say that this episode 2 is still about Moonwalk. It's a continuation of his memoir, and it's called Moonwalk When Michael Jackson Becomes a Global Icon.
So working with Paul also shifted Michael's approach in a way. For the first time, he was writing without Quincy Jones guiding every step, which he later said gave him confidence. Paul also introduced him to the idea of owning music publishing rights. While visiting Paul and Linda at their home, Paul showed Michael a book labeled MPL. Inside was a list.
Do you know what MPL means?
My guess is not going to be great.
Oh, it's good. It's because he still has that publishing company called that, by the way. It's called Mary, for the daughter that him and Linda had, Paul and Linda.
And you hear MPL.
MPL. Yes.
I looked. That's great.
Mary, Paul, and Linda.
Well, inside that Mary, Paul, and Linda book, it was a list of songs that Paul owned. Michael had never thought about buying songs before, but the idea stayed with him. Years later, when the ATV publishing catalog went up for sale, which had many Lennon-McCartney songs, Michael placed a bid. But recording Thriller was not glamorous, it was exhausting, and CBS Records demanded a deadline. At the same time, Michael was also working on the E.T. Storybook project, which came with its own pressure. When the first mixes were finished, Michael sat in the studio and listened to the album from start to finish, and he hated it.
Ooh.
He said the mixes sounded terrible. It brought him to tears. So he made a decision. They would mix the entire album again from scratch. And the team stepped away for a few days, came back with fresh ears, and started over. 2 songs at a time. And when they finished, Michael said the difference was immediate. This time, it worked.
Michael didn't want Thriller to exist only as music. He wanted it to be visual, something audiences would want to watch again and again. 3 songs became the center of that idea: Billie Jean, Beat It, and Thriller. These weren't simple promotional videos. They were short films, as Janice and I are sitting here watching, shot on a 35 millimeter film instead of videotape, something almost unheard of for music videos at the time. The budgets were enormous. CBS paid about $250,000 for the Billie Jean video. I don't know how much that is in today's standards, but it's very expensive. It's probably hitting $1 million at least, if not more. But when the label resisted the budgets for the other films, Michael stepped in and helped finance Beat It and Thriller himself because he believed the videos were just as important as the music.
Thriller was released on November 30th, 1982.
I got it for Christmas too.
Did you?
We got this one for Christmas as well.
And I love how you mentioned the way that the video for Thriller was shot and presented, so theatrically, because you always hear about what a spectacle it was for people to go and watch, and everyone remembers how it felt when they first saw that.
That's true.
And so the record company expected it to sell a few million copies, but instead, every new single pushed album sales even higher. Michael's team, led by Frank DeLeo and Freddie DeMann, made a bold move. They released Beat It while Billie Jean was still number one. CBS execs thought they were crazy. Frank insisted both songs would land in the top 10, and he was right.
And by the way, Frank DeLeo is an interesting character. So is Freddie DeMann. But Frank DeLeo was in Goodfellas. He was a CBS executive, but he definitely is in Goodfellas if people want to see him act. But he was the portly guy with the little ponytail that he was in all of his videos. He died after Michael died. He lived longer. But then came the performance that changed everything. And I remember watching this that night. Motown 25, Yesterday, Today, and Forever. Nearly 50 million people watched. I was one of them. Michael almost didn't do it. He disliked television, as we talked about, and initially said no. Berry Gordy personally talked him into it. He finally agreed on one condition. He would do it if he could perform Billie Jean, even though it wasn't a Motown song. And the night before the show, he still hadn't decided what he would do on stage. Standing in his kitchen, he made a choice. He would perform Moonwalk, the dance in public for the first time. Much of the performance ended up being spontaneous. He improvised it with his brothers. When it finished, Michael opened his eyes and saw the entire audience standing. Have you seen that performance?
I have.
Isn't it amazing? I mean, he improvised a lot of that. He felt good, but strangely dissatisfied. He thought he hadn't stayed on his toes long enough. And backstage, a young boy approached him and said, "Man, who taught you to dance like that?" Michael smiled. "Practice, I guess." The next day, Fred Astaire called him, "You're a hell of a mover." And from Michael, it was the greatest compliment he had ever received. And so he believed that it was one of his best performances after that.
And did he dedicate his book to Fred Astaire?
I think he did.
There's some mention.
You know
of
what?
him
You
in the
can see it.
beginning.
It's right there. Who did he dedicate it to?
Yeah.
He dedicated it to Fred Astaire. Oh,
I love it.
He loved Fred Astaire.
I mean,
and Charlie Chaplin and all those guys.
It's legendary.
Yeah, he'd always sing "Smile." That Cello Chaplin, that was his favorite song. It was sung in his funeral.
Such a good song.
It is.
And you're so right.
Yeah.
You're so right.
I think Usher sang it.
I wasn't in good shape during this funeral.
I wasn't either. That was insane.
That was tough to watch.
That was insane.
Well, by 1984, Thriller was selling 1 million copies a week. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
The Thriller film alone added another 14 million albums to its sales.
And it played on rotation on MTV. And actually, I want to say black artists were not being played on MTV.
Yeah.
So MTV was actually music television. They played videos day and night. And they only played white artists. And the CBS executive, Walter Yitnikoff, who was like over it, called the head of MTV. And he's like, "Well, we're just not going to play it." And he said, "Well, I will yank all of my artists off that's on there now if you don't play it." And that's why they started playing Michael. Michael Jackson paved the way for MTV to play black artists.
He walked so they could run.
Yes.
Wow.
He did. And it was the best thing that ever happened. This thing played day and night on there. People couldn't get enough.
Music videos were huge then, but I feel like after Thriller, it kind of like they became essential to your
Absolutely.
album release.
I mean, like Rick James was playing during that time. Look, you know what? You don't see any nipples right there on. I shouldn't say that, but it's true.
They do blend kind of in with.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's what that is. Maybe that's a little makeup.
It's just a little lack of.
We were talking about Michael. We weren't talking about a woman. That's all. It's one of his videos. You're not alone.
It's on the YouTube.
Yes, you're not alone. Yeah, maybe it was the TV. You see what I mean?
Yes,
I think that was on
that
purpose
was an
too.
interesting shot.
Yeah, he did that with Lisa Marie.
Mm-hmm.
You know who wrote that song? R. Kelly.
Oh, you didn't tell me that.
Mm-hmm. But anyways, I'm sorry I
No,
interrupted
it's okay.
you.
It's okay.
Sorry, everybody.
Well, eventually the record became Thriller, being the record, became
Yes.
the best-selling album in history per MJ's manifestation.
Yes. And that's something.
It's something.
I think it's still the best-selling album of all
I would
time.
be surprised.
I don't think anybody
Has
touched
kicked
him
Thriller
around the
off.
world like that. I don't think so.
Well, Michael won 8 Grammys and 8 American Music Awards for that, and the numbers were staggering.
I think that's still a record, too, in one night.
I mean, what, Adele won 6 one night or
Yeah,
7, but
not 8.
Not 8. It must have been such an exciting time, but
Oh, you should see the video of it. They show it on there. He brought Brooke Shields as his date and little Emmanuel Lewis.
I remember.
I didn't even
seeing
bring up
videos
about
of that.
relationships in this because Michael, I mean, they were just friends. He brought her as his date a lot. Well, she was very pretty good woman.
Was that like sort of post Blue Lagoon?
Yes, it was.
Brooke and-
That's when
yeah.
she was real. I mean, she was a model. I mean, Brooke Shields is like 6 feet.
Yeah, she's still gorgeous to this day.
Very beautiful. Yes.
But, you know, with all of this attention, and as exciting as it is, it's not without a personal toll. In his book, Michael said the constant attention of living in the public eye eventually wore on him. He started to withdraw, his diet changed, he started losing weight. And as his appearance changed, the press began speculating. Rumors about plastic surgery quickly spread. And in Moonwalk, he addressed him directly again. This is a set the record straight
Yes.
kind of book.
That's what he
about
said,
who I
too.
am.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, I'd like to set the record straight right now. I've never had my cheeks altered or my eyes altered. I've not had my lips thinned. I've never had a skin peel. Yet later in an interview with Oprah Winfrey, he explained another change that people were seeing. He had vitiligo,
Yes.
a skin disorder that we now know more about, which causes loss of pigmentation, and he said it ran in his family. But by the time that explanation reached the public, the speculation had already taken a life of its own. And the myth around Michael Jackson was beginning to grow just as fast as the music, if not faster.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was his uncle or somebody. I forgot which parent's side, but yeah, it was in his family. And we now know that was actually accurate.
I think his experience shed so much light on that because if that happened today, I think the public would have treated
Differently.
so much differently.
Look at Winnie Harlow. She's a model.
And she's flawlessly beautiful.
Yeah. And she makes a lot of money.
She does.
Very much
She
in
does.
demand. You know, when you think about it, I think that as the years wore on, he did get body dysmorphia. I think it just started wearing on him. Honestly, I just think Michael was traumatized from a young age.
Well, he never got to define what he liked about himself.
Right.
And if he thought he was going to, the public had another
Right.
idea about that.
And I read somewhere, and I don't know if, I read it in another biography about him, that he didn't want to look like Joe. A lot of this was, I don't want to look like Joe.
I can see that.
That's what it was about. I'm just saying. That discipline Joseph demanded, speaking of Joe, demanded in the small house in Gary, Indiana, had never really disappeared. First, he showed up in talent shows, then in nightclubs, then on stages around the world. By the time Michael stepped into the studio as an adult, the standard had already been set, and I think it crystallized, honestly. Getting it right wasn't optional, as I said earlier, and the mindset led to something the music industry had never seen before with Thriller. But it changed the man that he was. It really did.
And by 1984, Thriller had become something the music industry had never seen before, like we were saying.
Yeah, it's still selling. 80 weeks into the next year. That's why 1984, that's like almost 2 years later.
And then the performance on Motown 25,
Yeah.
the night that Michael Jackson introduced the Moonwalk as we currently know it to the world, it transformed him into something even bigger than a pop star.
Yes.
And it's worth noting that MJ invented the Moonwalk, which was like a play on the backslide, which was a popular dance at the time.
Okay.
But he added so much finesse, like, and made it smooth and added his neck movements to make it look like he was kind of just floating on a cloud.
Oh, like an effect.
Yeah, like an effect. And so the way that he just looks like he's gliding on
Yes.
air.
Jeffrey Daniels of Shalimar worked with him, and he said the little street kids, and
Taught him the-
Yeah, because you think about, remember that time in hip hop? I mean, that's when it was like Shabba-Doo, and some of them did come, and he would dance with them, and they really helped him perfect all of that.
Yeah, it was like a reflection of the culture, but he made
Yes,
a popular dance legendary.
absolutely.
And he had become a cultural event.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he went to the White House. I mean, they had like a Michael Jackson Day with Ronald Reagan. I mean, he blended cultures. He blended politics.
In a way that you hadn't seen
ever.
music
Yeah.
or by a music artist.
Right.
You know?
I mean, he really took it to the next level.
he had become a cultural event, but success at that level has its own momentum, and it doesn't necessarily stop.
That's true.
When you say it's going to. But every opportunity led to another appearance, another performance, another project. And in January of 1984, during a commercial shoot for Pepsi, that momentum nearly cost him his life.
Oh, I know. And it was like doing it because he had to deal with Pepsi. Every pop star wanted to deal with Pepsi after that because of Michael. Like he started that whole thing of where you have endorsements with, and they made it a spectacle. And he was there with his brothers. I think it was for the Victory Tour or something like that when they were about to go on tour on the Victory Tour, but that's why they were there. But Michael was supposed to walk down the staircase while magnesium flash bulbs exploded behind him, and one of those flash bulbs exploded like it was supposed to, and the sparks ignited his hair. He suffered third-degree burns to his scalp, injuries doctors later said could easily have been fatal. One of the first people to reach him was Miko Brando. You can guess who his dad was.
Mara.
Yep. He worked for him for many years.
Wow.
Yeah, he worked with Michael at the time, and he worked with Michael off and on for many, many years. The accident made the headlines around the world. Ironically, the publicity pushed Pepsi sales even higher. Later, the company returned with another offer, the largest commercial endorsement deal in history at the time. The deal was so large it entered the Guinness Book of World Records. Michael accepted. Then he donated $1.5 million of the money to a hospital for the burn center. Yeah, it was a big deal. And you know what? That video, the real video of him getting burned, is on YouTube as well.
I've seen it.
It's so sad.
It's so sad.
Because he starts jumping around and you know, when he realizes his hair's on fire. And you can imagine, because back then, it was a Jerry curl.
And, you know,
you got products on it. You got products on there. So that really was flammable, I'm sure.
You're just, I mean, carry good insurance, guys.
Exactly. And don't go around in your magnesium flash bulbs with a Jerry curl. Soon after came the Victory Tour, which would be 55 shows, 5 months, and guess what? Michael said he didn't want to do it. After Thriller, he believed the smartest move would have been to step back and focus on a new creative work. However, his brothers wanted the tour, so he agreed. For the first time in years, Jermaine Jackson returned to the group, and the Jacksons rode an enormous wave of popularity. It felt like the old days again, but Michael later admitted the tour never became what he hoped it would be. There wasn't enough time to perfect the production. The staging of Billie Jean disappointed him. The lighting wasn't right. The choreography never felt exactly the way he wanted it. By the way, this is from his book, so you can see the perfectionist in him. For someone who has spent his life chasing precision, settling for almost right was difficult. And yet once he stepped onto the stage, something changed. When the rhythm started and the lights hit him, the problems disappeared. The thrill of performing took over. Michael described it almost like a quiet voice saying, just wait until you hear this. And I want to say, he really was nice to his brothers and his family during this section, because you could do a deep dive alone on the Victory Tour and all of the mess that happened where he was just done. I mean, he was traveling in his own car. He was on his own plane during Victory Tour. He did not travel with his brothers. He had his own private plane. So there was a lot of stuff going on.
He writes pretty graciously.
He was that's the right word. Very graciously.
Throughout the whole book.
Yes.
The whole memoir.
Even to Joe, because I think it was going back a little bit to the father and dad and all that. I think it was Jackie and the editors who put father and dad. I think he called him Joseph because he never called him, they weren't allowed to call him that. He basically said it on Oprah. He insisted on it. He said, don't ever call me father or dad.
You're, saying, of course, that Michael's speaking graciously about his family because you could write a novel on the experience. Life on the road still had some moments of humor.
Yes.
Michael brought his boa constrictor named Muscles with him on tour. His manager, Frank DeLeo, hated snakes, and so Michael, the jokester, would chase him around the hotel rooms, holding the snake while everyone else laughed.
Okay, how would you feel?
Absolutely not.
Told you, I would have probably hurt Michael, punched him.
100%. After you put that snake down.
He did it to Shay, too. He did it to Shay. That's what he did. So if you go, Michael, you know what? I don't like snakes. And then he go, oh, come on, Janice. Don't you want to pet the snake?
Michael,
and then
you
run
can't
after
hold that snake forever.
He would do that. He did it a lot. even when we talk about it in the Thriller episode. But go ahead.
No, I love it, though, because, I mean...
He played lots of tricks.
And, I mean, you can kind of be a big kid when you're back around your family.
Yes. And he loved doing a lot of jokes. I mean, we'll talk about it more in the Thriller episode, how he was in the studio. But he loved doing stuff like this. But he really tortured poor Frank. Poor Frank. I mean, it was awful. So during the tour, he also received surprising news. His sister Janet Jackson had gotten married. No one wanted to tell him at first because they knew how close he was to her. He was. I read somewhere that wherever he went on tour, he would always, even when he was in, Gary, after they had just left and was part of the Jackson 5, would send her gifts from the road from all over the world. Michael said that Janet was his best friend growing up, and she was a tomboy who had always been by his side, and the news shocked him. He believed deeply in love and relationships. He said in Moonwalk that one day he said he hoped to find the right person and build a family of his own. He even joked that in his fantasy he imagined having 13 children. But in Moonwalk, Michael also admitted something more personal. There had been women in his life, people he cared about deeply, but he avoided naming them. He said it wouldn't be fair to pull private people into the spotlight. What he did admit was simpler. He was still searching for the right relationship that felt right because, as he wrote, "I believe I'm one of the loneliest people in the world." He did mention one person by name, and that was Brooke Shields, who he described as another love. And he just didn't want to bring anybody into that feeling.
He did mention the one person who understood what it was like to be under an insane spotlight.
Brooke Shields, yeah, definitely. And she had been a child star.
She had.
I remember Blue Lagoon. That was awesome.
And around that time, Michael was also becoming increasingly aware of the criticism directed at him. Of course, a lot of people in the press were claiming that he wanted to look white, and he rejected that idea. What mattered most to him, he said, was simply just being true to himself. By the end of his tour, the Victory Tour, he seemed to be trying to focus more on his heart's work.
Charitable stuff. And
he donated all of his performance earnings from the tour to charity, which was, at that point, more than $4 million.
That was very generous. Yeah. I did see that, the last stop on the Victory Tour, the performance that night, that he said on stage, well, this is our, we're not together anymore. Me and my brothers, it's been a great run, or something like that. He did it in a very professional way, but they were looking around going wait, what? What happened now? But when the Victory Tour ended, he made another decision. He decided to step back. For the first time in years, he withdrew from public life, probably what you're talking about, because of all the rumors. The world hadn't lost interest. If anything, the spotlight had grown even brighter. By that point, Michael Jackson had reached a level of fame few people in history had experienced, and he needed space. Space to think, space to create, space to imagine what could possibly come after Thriller. From the outside, it looked like the most successful moment of his life. The music, the tours, the headlines, yet something quieter was happening at the same time. The spotlight around Michael was growing stronger and brighter, and bright spotlights don't just reveal things, they begin to change the person standing inside of them.
But Michael didn't disappear. He went back to the studio, and for the next 2.5 years, he devoted most of his time to recording the follow-up to Thriller, which is one of my favorite albums of all time, Bad. Michael later said that he and Quincy Jones shared the same goal of making the new record not just successful, but, of course,
perfect.
As close to perfect as possible. By that point, Michael understood very clearly how difficult it would be to follow a record like Thriller. During the Bad sessions, Michael and Quincy pushed each other constantly.
And Michael usually arrived with the songs already written and shaped. Quincy listened carefully, then challenged him to go further. Sometimes that meant adjusting the arrangements. Sometimes it meant questioning an idea entirely. Occasionally it meant arguing. Michael wanted the newest sounds, the newest drum machines, the newest recording technology. He was always chasing whatever the next sound might be. The process would be intense. Michael ended up writing all but 2 of the songs on the album, Man in the Mirror, written by Saida Garrett and Glenn Ballard, and Just Good Friends. And after years of work, he said the effort had been worth it. I think he was still disappointed because it didn't top Thriller, and we know how he gets when...
But it made such a cultural impact, I think.
I know. I mean, I think that was a curse in a way, and one of his weaknesses in trying to top Thriller and not just kind of moving on from it.
And saying, hey, I did exactly what I said I was going to do with this.
And just transforming yourself. I understand perfection in the studio, but I think that was part of the downfall for him emotionally.
No, I completely agree. And, by this point, he had already been famous for almost his whole life.
Wow.
He wrote that fame does strange things to people. He believed that the only way to survive it was to stay private and keep a low profile. Because the hardest part of fame wasn't just the attention, but the utter lack of privacy. He remembered one moment clearly while discussing this very book with Jackie Kennedy and editor Shea Earhart in California. Photographers were sitting in the trees outside of the house, watching and waiting. That's just
Crazy.
Crazy thought. And Michael believed much of the public image people had of him was incomplete, of course.
Yeah.
The press printed the most sensational parts of the story. The quieter parts, the ones that explained things and gave context, were often left out.
True.
He admitted something openly. Yes, he was obsessed with privacy, but at the same time, he loved achievement, setting a goal and reaching it, and then pushing himself beyond it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, look at that kid, Ryan White. He was Michael's friend. He died of AIDS. He was like a little kid who had gotten it in a
And he put him in his video.
Yeah, he put him in his videos.
Wow.
He really loved Ryan White. Everybody should look up Ryan White. He really brought a lot of attention, yeah. And Ryan's mom was really grateful because Michael brought a lot of attention to AIDS like Princess Diana did. And, people didn't want to be around him, because he had AIDS, but he was a little kid, He died at 14, but he was Michael's friend. Yet many of the moments that mattered most to him had nothing to do with record sales. He spent much of his free time visiting Children's Hospital, befriending Ryan. I don't know when Ryan died, but sometimes sick children came to visit him at home. These visits meant something to him. Children, he said, saw the world differently. They noticed things adults ignored. They weren't cynical. They weren't suspicious, and they accept people as they were. And he said that when he struggled with his appearance as a teenager, dealing with acne and growing up in public, children were the ones who never rejected him. They understood that he was still the same person inside. And I think this is important that we're talking about this as we're looking at the song he did to Ryan and the video he did to Ryan. So here's the thing about Michael Jackson's story. And we're going to play a little game. We did this even in the Britney one. The world didn't just misunderstand parts of it. Over time, a completely different character took shape in the public imagination, a figure built from headlines, speculation, and spectacle. And once that version took hold, almost everything he did was interpreted through it. But when you actually read Moonwalk, a quieter and more human portrait appears, and we're going to try and play myth versus reality. So you're going to do myth number 1.
Okay, let's play. Myth number 1. Michael Jackson was naturally confident and loved the spotlight. But the memoir describes almost the opposite. Michael repeatedly calls himself shy, says that interviews made him uncomfortable, talk shows made him nervous. And that's one reason he agreed to write the book in the first place.
Boom.
Because
you talked about that.
It allowed him to speak in his own voice, without interruption, without being misinterpreted. And oddly enough, the only place he felt completely relaxed was the stage. When the music started, he said he disappeared into it.
Wow. Myth number 2, Michael Jackson carefully manufactured every aspect of his image. I almost think this is a little bit of myth and a little bit of reality as his life went on. But in Moonwalk, Michael pushes back on that idea. He believed a lot of the public image around him came from stories, this is true, that had been repeated so many times that they started to feel like facts, almost like in Billie Jean, where the lie becomes the truth, like what his mom said. Once the media settled on a narrative, he said, it was almost impossible to change it. That's true. The most sensational parts traveled the farthest. That's one reason he agreed to write Moonwalk, to tell his story himself without someone else interpreted it. And here's where the story gets a little ironic. In 1988, Michael still felt like he was reacting to an image that had grown around him. He was trying to explain it, but as the years went on, the opposite started to happen. The more intense the spotlight became, the more carefully he tried to control what the world saw. And eventually the line between protecting his privacy and managing his image got harder to separate. It blurred.
And then we were talking about this earlier. I think Michael Jackson tried to manufacture his image, but it didn't work because he's just so big. The public's going to say what it wants to about you. It'll take what it wants. So interesting. Okay, myth number 3. Michael Jackson only became musical when he stepped on stage or into the studio. Of course not.
Right.
But, I do love the detail in the afterword to the book that said that when editor Shea Earhart first visited him with Jackie Kennedy, she noticed that music wasn't something he switched on when the studio studio light came on. He was always humming, walking down the stairs, sitting in the car, talking between meetings, little fragments of melodies constantly drifting through his head. Music was always there, and it shows.
And you know what? That's absolutely very true, because there's somebody that I used to work with at my with the studio you and I met at.
Of course.
And she's still there. And her dad was big in the music industry. And when I went to lunch with her when she had first started there, I asked her about I didn't ask her about it. She said she knew him because of her dad. And she said he was always in his own world. He would hum to himself. Like, music was never, she said that exactly. You know, shout out to Carolyn, because Carolyn is the one who told me that.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to envision this persona as someone who doesn't go home and think in music and dream in music.
Right. And we'll see how that crystallized. I think it crystallized when they left Motown and he had the freedom to start writing some of these songs like Heartbreak Hotel and all of these things, and Off the Wall when he was writing things. I think he had an opportunity to really, grow, because if they had stayed with Motown, they would have just been another band that performs every year, going to smaller venues, but he was too big for all that. So there was an unknown fact. Not everyone who encountered Michael quite knew what to make of him. One detail comes from the early days of Moonwalk. During the writing of it, during the making of it, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis helped bring the book to life as the editor, but according to art director J.C. Suarez, who worked on the book, Jackie found parts of Michael's world puzzling. The surreal bedroom decor, the unusual atmosphere of the compound, and animals on the property that raised concerns about their well-being. She went to Havenhurst. She wasn't at Neverland. And moments like that reveal she reportedly called him a bit of a freak. Even people who met him in person sometimes struggled to interpret what they were seeing, because by then the line between creativity, privacy, eccentricity, and fame had already begun to blur around him. So I also do something around books. And, Janice, we revamped the show.
I love this.
See. All right. So we're going to give Moonwalk a rating and tell why and all that fun stuff. But, we'll review it using the Rockabyes book rating system, which means we're not just asking, did we enjoy the book? We're asking something deeper, like, what kind of memoir is this? Does it give us insight? Did it feel honest? And does it actually help us understand the person behind the icon? And when you step back and look at Moonwalk, a pattern becomes pretty clear that Michael was writing at the height of his fame. And the book reflects the image he wanted the world to see, which is what you caught on so quickly. Yeah. It's funny that you caught on to that. You told me before we even started taping. It's crazy. You'll have to tell me why you thought that way. But he spends a lot of time on his childhood, his mother and his faith, and the discipline his father demanded, and all of that stuff. But music is always at the center of his life. It's the creation is always the focus. And in Michael's telling, this is the story of an artist building his life. And I'll let you tell where you're strongest, but I'll just go ahead and tell mine.
Yeah, go for it.
But at the same time, like a memoir, I think it's shaped by what it doesn't explore. It doesn't dwell on his romantic relationships. It doesn't spend time on the emotional toll of fame. It does spend some time on it. It does, but not a lot. And he is very gracious, like you said, to his family and his dad. I think it was very brave of him to admit that Joe was abusive to him. And he avoids the kind of deeply personal confessions you might expect from a modern celebrity memoir, like Liza Minnelli. I already heard little hints coming out of that. But it's important to remember something. When this book was published in 1988, Michael Jackson was only 29 years old. Many of the events would later dominate public debate about him hadn't yet happened. So what we're reading is not a full life story. It's a snapshot, a self-portrait created at a very specific moment. And I gave it a 3.5 stars out of 5. And 3.5 is it is a solid memoir. It's clear writing, good, and has insights and a sense of who Michael was, because some of what he said does still stay today. The abuse by Joe, how he felt about perfection, I think in later years it really overtook him to a fault. And I think that I did get a full, clear version of who he was.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, 3.5 is a fair rating. I mean, it's not a confessional memoir.
Right.
It is closer to a statement of identity. And like we were saying earlier, it feels like it's like, this is who I am at a time when I feel like for the first time, the media is really trying to define me. And so I gave it 4 stars.
Did you?
Because...
And tell them what 4 stars are.
So 4 stars is well written, engaging, and insightful.
It's true.
And
true.
you understand the person more deeply.
True.
And the reason I gave it 4 stars is knowing how private he wanted to keep his life.
Yes.
And sharing glimpses that...
And he was shy.
He was so shy. And so here he's sharing glimpses that, even when you read between the lines, show a lot about how he perceives himself and the experiences that shaped him. It's something that I can appreciate, and he did it in a way that this is his memoir. He's not sitting down for an expose, like an interview. You know, he did it in his way, and he talked about what he wanted to in his own, you know, his voice.
Right. Yeah. That's true. A lot of the stuff still stands. Oh, there's Heavy D. Rest in peace, Heavy D. They're playing the Space Jam with Michael Jordan. Oh, the kids from, what's the name of these
Not
kids?
Kid and Play.
It's not Kid and Play. It's the kids. Jump, jump. Let Daddy make it jump. Jump. And they're
Crisscross.
Crisscross, yeah. And their names were Chris. You know, one of them have passed on, so rest in peace, Chris. Yes, one of them did. Yeah, man, that's Michael Jordan. But yes, that was a great video too.
Yes.
I mean, Heavy D too. Rest in peace, Heavy D.
Yeah.
So there's a moment near the end of Moonwalk, that feels striking when you read it today. It's kind of mind-blowing a little bit. So Michael reflects on performers who died too young. This is what he talks about in Moonwalk. I can't believe I saw it. He mentions Marilyn Monroe and Jimi Hendrix. He said artists whose lives ended before the world could see what they might have become. Many performers, he writes, became tragic figures, destroyed by pressure, addiction, or fame itself. This is literally in Moonwalk.
It's almost a foreshadow.
Yes. Fans are left wondering what they might have created if they had lived longer, like the This Is It concert. Not too sure he would have lived through it, honestly. I mean, it would have been a lot. 50 shows, come on. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
he's not 9 years old anymore.
Right, he was 50 years old, and, you know, if they had been allowed to evolve. But Michael wrote these words. He was only 29. His story still felt like it was just beginning, and reading that passage, it just carries quite the irony, you know, because even then the pressures he described were already part of his life. The Pepsi commercial accident left him in severe pain, and doctors started prescribing him medication to help him recover. It was during that time. And that's when he became kind of hooked on the pain pills. And like many performers before him, the line between treatment and dependency would eventually blur and become part of his story.
Yeah.
But it's just incredible that he talked about it. And
He was sharp enough to see it happening in other people.
Yeah, he just didn't see it happening with him.
Himself.
Isn't that something?
What a lesson in life for everyone.
I know, it's crazy.
Yet the way he ends the book isn't dark because he returns to something simpler. Despite the pressure and despite the scrutiny, he believed the ability to bring joy to people made it worth it. For him, performing had one purpose: to give people a moment of escape, a moment of release from whatever was weighing on them. And the book ends simply, the end. Michael Jackson, 1988. Today, of course, Michael Jackson's life is often discussed through controversies that came later, which those debates are, of course, complex and they continue to divide opinion. But Moonwalk wasn't written from that place. It was written years before those chapters of his life unfolded. So what we're reading here isn't the full story. It's the story that Michael chose to tell at 29 years old, frozen in that moment in time. And that distinction matters when you approach the book as a memoir.
That is so true. And if there's one thing, we're going to the next episode, episode 3. It's gonna be a delight. A delight. If there's one thing Moonwalk makes clear is that Michael didn't see himself primarily as a celebrity. He saw himself as a creator. Again and again in the book, the moments that excite him most aren't the awards or the headlines. They're the quieter moments. Being in the studio late at night, building a song piece by piece, perfecting a performance until every movement feels right. Chasing an idea until it becomes something no one has ever seen before. And that creative process, the way Michael actually imagined music, is a story in itself. So in our next episode, we're going to step inside of Michael Jackson's creative mind, how he wrote his songs, how he built albums, specifically Thriller. We're going to do a deep dive on Thriller because that really highlighted and set the stage for who he was, what Motown had given him until that point, and some fascinating facts. I can't wait to share it with you guys. And, how that perfectionism shows up even in Thriller and later, but how you really get a snapshot of it. Mm-hmm. And because once you understand how Michael Jackson created, you start to understand why the music sounded the way it did and why it still resonates to this very day into the movie that's coming out. And that's the end of the second episode, Janine. So she'll be back to do the next episode because there's a lot of good stuff. So thank you all for listening. I meant to add to subscribe wherever you get Rockabyes. And Janice will be back because she's great. And Megan stepped away. She had somewhere to go.
I miss my Megan.
Megsy. Yes. And everybody take care. And thank you for listening and joining this episode with us.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to listen to the songs that were mentioned in the series, you can go to a curated playlist of the artist and Spotify under Rockabyes playlist. Please subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. One additional note, the information in the episodes are based on my best research. I'm your host, Melissa. Always remember, you're a shining star no matter who you are.